Okay, welcome back to our series of tutorial about shading in 3ds Max 2010. The last time we worked on a car paint shader done with the standard material, and this time we'll work on a rock shader done with the procedural maps. As you can see, this is the final render we'll try to obtain with this shader. This will be the last tutorial about shading for the moment, and the next tutorial will be back on a very interesting um, kind of stuffs like the underwater sheen I worked on for a tutorial on CG Cookie some months ago, and we'll start to work on an underwater sheen and some stuffs about sea and ocean environment, and we'll try to see how to model, how to shade, how to light, how to render and animate all the stuffs up the sea and under the sea. Okay, for the moment it's time to start with our shader, and we can see the final result. This rendering is done with Mint Array, but you can use also the standard Scanline rendering engine, and also some third-party render as V-Ray or Final Render or Brazier RS. Let's start with the tutorial. This is our sheen. As you can see, I have a very simple setup to concentrate our efforts on the creation of the shader and to tune the rendering. And as you can see, I have a simple sphere in the sheen, and we'll try to morph the sphere in a rock. The sphere is very simple. It's a normal sphere with all the default parameters, and I made a very simple lighting setup, as you can see, and I have a target direct, and I use this light as the main light, and I have the shadow maps. No problem for the parameters for the moment. It is not so much important for our tutorial. And I set the multiplier to 1.4 and the color is white, and then I have also two fill lights, and I used some omni lights like this one, and I used the lower multiplier, something around 0.9, and I used orange, but you can choose the light the color you want. It is just to have some area not too cold. And I use the second fill light like this one, and it is with a multiplier like always like 0.9, and I use the blue color. The fill light can be with specular or with no specular like this one. You can decide it with no problem. It depends if you are trying to feel the lighting of the mesh, or you are trying to simulate some kind of lighting coming from the environment. And there's no shadow maps or retrace map active in the fill light. You can try also different lighting setup as you want. It is not so much important. Let's start checking my shader, and we'll try to recreate the shader step by step. I saved the sheen to be sure, and I can open the material editor, and there you can see my shader. I can change the name to rock, and we can see a preview, and it is not so complex. Okay, let's see how to create this shader step by step. As you can see, we have not a good preview about the displacement in the slot preview, but it will be not a problem for the moment because we can see it trying to render some tests. Let's go in the material editor, and let's see the base structure of the shader. As you can see, it's a standard shader. I change again the name, and it's a standard material. I'm using a Blinn shader, And the only the part that you have to set for the moment is to set the specular level to 100, but later we'll use a texture, some kind of map to control and to change the specular level. And you can set the glossiness to 22 or something like that. For the moment I can remove every single layer to check the rendering. I can go in the rendering parameters. You can set Mental as standard base rendering engine. I set again back the anti-alias to minimum for 1.4 and maximum to 4. I'm using the Mitchell type of filter because it is very sharp, but we have a lot of precision in the rendering. And let's go to the other parameters, and I have to set again the displacement to a lower level, and you have to set the edge length for the moment to 2.0, so the minimal value for the length of an edge for the micro polygons for the displacement will be 2 pixels. And we have to set back the max subdivision to 16 key for the moment. For the final render we can set back to the higher value. Please remember to set to off the indirect illumination for the final gather, so you have no final gather and on GI for the moment, but there's no problem to use the GI or the final gather with this shader. It's only for to be very fast for our test. Let's go back to the shader and let's start to see how the shader works, and let's start from the color of the shader. So in the diffuse color I put a composite, and let's see the difference. I try to make a very simple rendering, and this is the base setup with the standard material. And now we can see the same rendering with the composite I put in the diffuse color, and it is not bad, as you can see. So let's check how it works. I go in the composite, and we have 3 layers. The first one is a cellular map, and it works in this way. We have a base coloring with some kind of grain and some white dots created using the set color, and a good level of variation. I used the 70, but you can use less or more, and you can see that if I use more we have less white point, and we can have less bright point. I can go back, and if I use, for example, 0, we have a lot of white point, but it's better to have more cows. And other things we have to do is to set the cell to chips, and I use the small value for the size, 2.2, but you have to check it in your machine because the scale can be different. And I use the spread near to 1.0, and you can see the difference because the 0.5 is the default value, and as you can see we have a lot of white point, but sorry, I try to have some kind of minerals inside the shader, so I go back to 0.97, and I changed the value of the mid to 0. The default value is 0.5, and as you can see we have a lot of dots, white or something like white, but I prefer to have less white stuffs. And for the moment it's everything about this color map, because I changed no more stuffs. and we have a second layer, and this layer is based on a noise map, and it is very simple. It is to change a little the coloring of the surface. So I use the fractal, and I have a very high levels parameter because I have 10, and it is better because we have a lot of detail. And I have 25 for the sides, and we have black for the color 1, and something like that for the color 2, something similar to sand or some kind of dust. Okay. Let's see if I change something in the output. No, it's everything with the default parameters. And I can close this preview. Okay, we have to wait to see the preview. And I use it to mask the noise for the second layer, and to have as you can see the noise only in some some zone of the mesh, and the mask is a cellular. It is a little complex, and I use the default color value, but a lot of variation for the white, and I use a 92, but you can use something like that. And I can set to off this this map on the black coloring, and I use the circular shapes, and we have the size set to 30 or something like that, and the fractal is set to 1, and I have an high value for the iteration. I used something around 12, and I have the spread to 0.6, and everything else is set to the default value. In the black zone, I use it to set a smoke value, and we can see how it changes. Okay, you see that in the white value, because I set the inverse 1, so the black will be the white, and I have more detail, so it is not white, only white, but I have this kind of texture, and to prepare this texture I use the smoke, and the size is little. I set the size to 1.0, and everything else is set to default. And this mask will be useful to put the dust over the surface. The last we can see maybe some kind of examples. This is the first layer, the layer 1. Now we can see it with the layer 2 set to off. You can see that we have some kind of dust or sand over the surface. And let's see the last layer. For the last layer, I prepared a noise, a very little noise, because you can see that the size is set to 0.7. I have a very high value for the levels, 10. The noise type is turbulence, and the other parameters are set to the default. And I use another mask to put this this texture over the other layers, and the mask use a color correction to have a better contrast for the white and the black zone. So you can see that we have the color correction, the map is a smoke, and I set the brightness to 27 and the contrast to something similar to near the 70. The smoke, as you can see, with no contrast, I have not so wide zone, so that's why I use the contrast and the brightness also. For the smoke I used a very high sides, and I used 40, and I used a swapped color, because you can see that for default the color 1 is black and color 2 is white, and I used a different solution. So we have white for the color 1 and black for color 2, and I used the low exponent 0.3. The default value is 1.5, and you can see the difference. We have a lot of white, and it's not okay, because I'd like to put this texture only on some little zone, so I prefer to have this kind of effects. I can go back and back again. We have to wait for the rendering, and we have to wait, and we can see a new rendering test with all the 3 layers. That's the final result for the diffuse map. Let's move to another effects, and these effects will be on the specular level. As you can see, I have a very high specular, but we have no difference over the surface, and it seems very similar to some kind of metals or maybe some plastics. But we know that a rock cannot reflect the light in this way, so we can have the light reflected over some part, maybe some little rock, and the difference will be based on the material, on the mineral that will compose the different part of the rock. So I created a composite also for the specular level, and we can try to see the difference with the specular and without the specular. So that's without the specular map, and that's, we have to wait, with the specular maps. As you can see, we have some little dots where we have the specular, and then we have bigger dots with more specularity, and we are trying to simulate some a presence of different minerals in the rock. I used a very high value for the mount, and we have 250. You can try to use different value to understand how it works, but we can see that if I use a low value, we go again back to something similar to plastic or metals. Maybe this can be similar to a rusty metal. And if we have a too high value, we have too bright specularity. So let's go again back to our default value, and let's see the composite that I created for the specularity. We have again 3 layers, and the first one is a cellular, and we try to simulate some little minerals present in the rock. So I have only the white for the cell color, and then I have black and black for the division colors. I have variation to 100, so we have less white or maybe complete white for the dots, and I have the circular for the type of cell, and I have size 0.2, so it's very little to have a lot of detail, and the other parameters is set to the default. We can try to see the difference for the variation, trying to have a bigger size. Let's try with 5. You can see that we have white, maybe gray, or maybe darker gray. If I use the default 0, we have everything very similar to white. So we can go back to 100, and I can go back to 0.2 for the base value. And I set off the other layer, and let's try to render again the test, and let's see the difference. Okay, you can see that we have a grainy specularity, and we are trying to simulate the minerals inside, and it can be okay, but I like to have more specularity on some parts, like this there's little white dots over the rock. So let's go back in the composite and let's see the second layer. I have again a cellular, but this time I tried to use the chips and the bigger sides like 2.2, and the spread is set to 0.76. Then I have the black and black for the division color to simulate only some dust, some dots over the surface, and I have the mid thresholds set to 0. The default is 0.5, and as you can see we have a lot of dust, so using 0 we have less dots point over the surface, and everything else is set to the default. Let's see how change the rendering. And now you can see that I have a lower value for the little dots, and I can see a very high specular over this part, this white dots that I see also in the diffuse color. Let's go back and let's see how I set the layer. I used an opacity set to 54, and I used the blending mode different, the linear burn, so I can see better this layer and less the second layer, but you can try also to use a different configuration for this one. Let's continue to check the third layer, this one, and let's wait for the preview. And as you can see, we have set a blending mode to the addition, so we can add this map to the other layer, and an opacity is set to 33, but you can use less or more. This layer is again a cellular to add some other little dots point with a very high value for the specularity. And I set again white for the cell color and black for the division colors. I use a chips and a side of 0.3 and a spread of 0.63, and the midpoint for the threshold again set to 0. No other parameters are changed, so we can see again a rendering test, and in a few seconds. Now we have also some little dots with more specularity over the base specularity dots. You can try to make experiments with the specular level and change it as you like. Let's go to the bump map, and I used an amount of 30, not so much because we'll use also the displacement. In the bump I used a single map, and this map is a smoke, and let's see how it works. I set the smoke to 2.0, and let's see maybe a preview of the material. Let's wait for it. Okay, you can see the bump over the surface, and that's in a few seconds with no bumps. Let's go back to the bump set to 1, and let's see how the map is set. Okay, oh sorry, let's go in the smoke and let's see the final result, and you see also the smoke. Okay, the size is 2.0, so the level of detail is high, and I used a very high value for the iteration to have a very complex level of detail, and all the other parameters set to the base default value. Let's see again the final result, and you can see that we have a good bump over the surface that can be not bad for the base of the quality we'd like to obtain for the rock shader. I think we can move to the last part, and maybe the most important part, that can transform and morph the base shader in a rock shader, and can morph a simple sphere in a rock mesh. let's see the displacement. I used the fourth one, but you can get more or less, and it's your choice. I can see that I used again a composite, and we have 4 layers. I try to set to off the 3 base layer, and let's see how I set all the layers and how and why I use this layer. The first layer is based on a cellular again, but with this cellular I try to create some structure over the surface, some cracks, as you can see, and I use the base color value for the cell and the division. I use the chips and not the circular, because you can see the difference. So the chips I set fractal to on, and this is why, as you can see. I have something around 6 for the iteration. I have something near the 60 for the sides. I used 57, 58, and I use a low level for the spread at 0.3, because so we can see more white and less black, and we can see that with the default it's 0.5. Let's wait, and we have 2 gray area, so again to 0.3, and the output value and all the other stuffs are set to the default. So let's see a rendering test, and we can see how it works. Now we have to wait a little because we are using the micro triangle displacement, but as you can see it's very fast, and that's the result. We see some cracks over the surface, and it seems to be very interesting. It can be very useful also to simulate some kind of desertic land. Maybe in a future tutorial we can see how and when. Let's go back to the composite, and we can see the second layer. On the layer I set the opacity to 50, so we can see half of this layer over the layer 1. I can set to on, and we can set the new result. We obtain a more complex result and more detail over the white and the black zone. Let's see how I set the map. I use the noise, I set to turbulence, I set the size to 25 and the levels to 10 and the height threshold to 0.7, around 0.7, and I swapped the color, because the default is black for the color 1 and white for the color 2, and now we can see the result. We have to wait some seconds as always, and you can start to see the result. We have again the cracks, maybe less cracks, but we have a lot of rock detail over the mesh, and now it seems some kind of rock with some cracks over the surface. And go back in the composite, and let's see the third layer. I used the third layer to create some kind of holes cracks over the surface. I used the 43 for the opacity. I try to have also the preview to see it, and I used the multiply blending mode, so the black part will be visible and the white will be not visible. So let's set to on, and let's see the result of the texture, and you can see that we have some black area, and let's see the result. Maybe it can be useful to have a copy of the rendering this time, and let's rendering again. the sheen, and let's see the difference. It's clear that you can use different configuration for the various layer to have more presence or less presence of every single layer. You can see, for example, that we have some holes over the surface now, and for example here and here, but we can try also to have a more presence of holes. I can set, for example, the opacity to 90 or maybe 100, and let's see again the rendering. We'll see that the hole will be more present and more visible in this new rendering test. Let's wait. And that's the result. We have a more visible hole over the surface, and you can choose to, you can choose to have it like this or maybe less, like the previous test. Let's go back to 23 and let's see the last layer. I tried to put some difference over the surface in the holes. As you can see, I used the map used for the creation of the holes as mask, but I had to invert the map because I have to set to put this texture in the holes, so the holes must be white. So you have to copy this map in the mask, and you have to swap the color or maybe use the invert parameter. You have to remember that later, if you change the parameters of this map, you have to change also this kind of parameters in the mask, because I cannot use the instance for those maps because this one has the swapped color. Let's see the preview. Okay, and let's see how it works over the surface. Okay, you can see that in the holes we have a grainy area and we have a lot of detail. I used the 100 for the opacity, and I use again multiply, so the black will be visible and the white will be not visible. Let's see the texture, and the texture is a noise. I use a noise because it's very simple to create a grainy texture using noise. And I use the fractal. I have a very high value for the levels, 10, and I use the size 1.0 and nothing more. Now we can see the rendering test with this value. We have to wait for the preview. Okay, let's render again. And as you can understand, the shader has a lot of composite and a lot of maps, procedural maps, but it is very simple, and you can obtain in a very fast way a rock shader that can be changed, because you can adapt it for a lot of kind of rock. You can change or add more colors or minerals over the diffuse. You can change the displacement using these layers, or maybe more layers, and you can use, and you can remember that this is entirely procedural, so you can use it over all the mesh you want. Let's see again the final result. This is the final result, and let's see, for example, if we apply this shader to a different mesh, like a teapot, we can create a teapot. I can set the segments to 10. I can put this shader. Let's try to make a very simple test using a not too high resolution, only to understand if it works in the right way. Now it's slower because we are using two mesh with displacement, so we have to wait a little. And in the meantime, I like, oh, it is too much, as you can see, but the rock effects is okay also in the teapot. The difference now is based on the scale of the mesh. So to adapt the various maps on the teapot, you have to change the scale of every single procedure used. A very interesting thing is that an advanced user can create, for example, a scripted material to have a single user interface to control all the stuffs and all the maps we use in this shader. Let's try to see a bigger test for the teapot, the rock teapot. And in the meantime, I'd like to remember that, as I said at the beginning of this tutorial, for the moment we'll get a pause on the shader stuffs, and we'll move on a very interesting stuff for the CG world, and we'll work on some video tutorial on how to create underwater environment and sea landscape. So stay tuned. I think we'll start next week with the first part. So that's the result. As you can see, it seems not no more a normal teapot. Now it seems a teapot made by rock. And I can say, please try this shader. Try to change the color, the displacement, and try to use it over a lot of mesh. I can make the last experiment. I can remove this mesh, and I can try it on a plane like this one. We can do it bigger, maybe like this. Okay, I can use more segments, and I can use over the plane, let's wait, a noise. I can use an I value. Let's see it with the edges faces, and we can use the fractal, and let's try to use the same shader. Let's make a little test and let's see the result. Again, we have a problem with the scale, but you can see that the result is not bad, because we see a lot of detail, for example, in the diffuse channel. To have a better result for the displacement, you have to change the scale, and that's the result. It's not bad, not bad. Okay, for the moment that's all. Please wait for the next tutorial, and thanks again, and we'll see you very soon. Bye.